then a completely different approach, but no less interesting, is one of the blockchain initiatives from the Chinese government. So I say one of because the one that's really captured the headlines is the national digital currency, the central bank digital currency. From looking at the initial designs that have been put out there, the national digital currency doesn't actually use blockchain technology, but uses some aspects of it. But this second initiative is called the BSN, Blockchain-Based Service Network. And if you go back to, think back to the problems I presented earlier, one of the problems for companies is actually setting up a network among equals. So who sets it up, who owns it, setting up a consortia, why should we join a consortia, what's the point of the consortia, who's going to benefit, and so on. And also dealing with the cost, because what you're doing with blockchain is you're replicating your infrastructure costs. So instead of deploying something once, you're now deploying it 10 times because you want it to be 10 times more secure. But that's also going to cost you 10 times as much because you're now the storage and processing of that activity that you're securing is now happening in 10 different places by 10 different entities that have to cover those costs. So one of the things that the Chinese have done in order to accelerate adoption of the technology is they've designed and they're about to launch this blockchain service network. And this is backed by a set of nodes which are distributed amongst local cities. So it's planned to be spread across 200 different cities in China who are already on board. And the Chinese government will heavily subsidize this blockchain network. And in doing that, it's really solved two problems. One problem is how do I create a network? I've got a solution that I want to deploy, but where do I deploy it? How do I create a network? Do I create a consortium? And the problem I've just described. Do I use a public network? So here you have a network which is already out there, which is compliant in terms of government regulations. So you know that it already solves that problem as well. Will be heavily subsidized by the Chinese government. So the point about cost and how do you make it worthwhile, and how do you remove that as a barrier to adoption, goes down massively because they're effectively taking 10x off the hosting cost of a network by heavily subsidizing it. So they're really taking away all the barriers that a business has to start not just experimenting with, but using for practical purposes to start putting their transactions through a blockchain network. Of course, being China, the Chinese government is subsidizing this, but the government is also connected to and has a handle on the applications and the network itself. So of course that allows them to keep an eye on the activity, but that's the environment. So I wouldn't underestimate the impact and the speed at which this will drive adoption across businesses in China.